Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Lessons Learned, the dumbest thing I've ever done with money. My name is Suzanne, and I'm the head coach at G.R.A.C.E Financial Coaching. And today we're talking to a team of people, which we haven't done before, the Matadoras. We've got Deana and Lizzie, and they are going to regale us with their tale of financial hardship. But I want to introduce them first and say thank you, ladies, for both joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome. So tell us about the Matadoras and what you guys do. Deana, we'll start with you.
Well, the Matadoras is a very interesting story of two women, Lizzie and I, who are married to the same toxic narcissist, and not at the same time. And we watched him in horror go on to wife number 3 while he was married to Lizzie, by the way. He was dating and courting a woman with children and becoming a family with her without either of them knowing. And we, went to find this lady to warn her, and that's in our podcast and in our story. So that's an interesting story. But we watched in horror as he wrecked her and her children's lives, and then went on to another one, number 4, and then found out from her that her life was a terrible mess. So we couldn't stand it anymore. And Lizzie actually kind of grabbed me by the ear and said, "We're telling our story. This is going to be told. We just can't sit by and watch these things happen." So that's where we started the Matadoras, and just went ahead and created a podcast and all the social media things, and just trying to either help women to not get in these relationships in the first place, or if they're in these relationships, try to help them with the incredible amount of trauma and confusion and stress that goes along with all of it.
That is incredible. So who figured it out first? Lizzie, did you figure it out first, or did Deana figure it out first?
I did. I went back into the house after the divorce was settled, because I had a list of items in the divorce, and I had found some cards that looked like something I had written. So it looked a lot like my handwriting. And I picked them up, and I noticed they were from somebody else. And her faith, you could tell that she had no idea I existed. And there was dates on the cards that correlated with what was I was trying to figure out what was going on in the relationship. And and I had all her information. Well, I had some information, and I called Deana immediately, and I was in a state of shock at first, but called Deana immediately, and then we just went on this quest to find her. And I think it was like 3 months later, we were able to kind of make contact.
Wow, that's incredible. So Deana, what was getting that phone call like, or letter, or however you eventually heard from Lizzie?
Well, hearing from Lizzie, or you mean the third woman?
Well, when you guys made contact initially.
Oh goodness, yes. When Lizzie let me know about this, oh my gosh. It was absolutely shocking, but it wasn't, because I had been with him for 27 years. And I didn't know anything about a double life while he was with me, but he was with many, many women because he had a terrible sex addiction. So it was a surprise, but not a surprise, because this was kind of a new twist on his addiction. But then when thinking about it, and Lizzie and I talking about it, the way that she had been treated for the past 9 months, which led to her leaving, made complete sense, because it was like he was pushing her away in the relationship, just like someone would do if they were with someone else and didn't want to be with you. But they didn't want to be the one to be the bad guy or to divorce you. You know what I mean? They just want you to leave. So
yes, I've seen that before in other relationships, where the person who's doing the cheating is also the one who's doing the pushing away, because it's going to make it easier on that person, or they're going to be able to justify their behavior or something to that effect. It is it's unfortunately a tale as old as time, but most of the women who are involved in these stories don't find each other. So this is really interesting and incredible that you guys have been able to form this partnership. So now, as the Matadoras, you guys are offering really just a place for women to go to say, "I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one this has ever happened to," or if there are other people out there, and now they can kind of realize or come into their own and say, "This is not something that I have to go through alone, or I will be the last person or the first person to go through," right?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And I think that's a really beautiful way to put it, because this is a very isolating and lonely place to be. And there's a lot of grief involved. And when we have grief like that, it's a very lonely and strange bedfellow, so to speak. And, you know, it makes you kind of lose relationships because you just don't know how to process it. I don't think any of us have, you know, tools right away because none of us think we're going to be here. I definitely did not think I was going to be here. And especially since I had been married before. So I thought I had known all the warning signs. I thought I was smarter than that. And then it was like, oh my goodness, I just went to that spiral of a just strange place. Yeah.
I think one of the things that prevents, now you guys are better off to tell me this, but one of the things that I feel prevents women or men, because, you know, there are men who find themselves in this situation sometimes, with a manipulative partner, it's embarrassing. It's
Yes.
like how I am, you know, let's just be dramatic. I am college educated. I have a master's. I have this. I have that. I am too smart for this, right? And the embarrassment, I think, to me, is usually the first thing that prevents people from seeking others or seeking counseling or seeking coaching or seeking help. Do you guys see that too?
100%. And it took me a long time, even after my divorce, to like put that I was single. Or I didn't even put I was single. I just put nothing, but like to kind of just mess with pictures. Anything that would give people a questioning, you know, because people like to look at your profiles and they like to kind of go through it. And then it's like, he's not in the picture anymore. So it took a long time for me even to do that after I had left him. And there was a lot of people that were shocked when they found out that I had left him. Like they were like, oh, I thought you guys were doing pretty well. I thought this was a great marriage. And I almost had to look at it and say, me too. But it took me a long time to even say anything, you know. Yeah. I even wore my wedding ring 3 months after my divorce was final.
Because sometimes that's just easier, right? Yeah. Like, I don't feel like dealing with questions. I don't feel like, you know, I find that happens with people with losing a loved one. Like sometimes you find out one of your friend's parents passed away and you're like, what? How did I miss this? And they didn't want to talk about it, right? Or they weren't ready to talk about it. And so wearing the wedding ring 3 months past divorce is the equivalent of not telling your friend that your mother died, because you just can't really handle it. You haven't processed it yourself, much less helping someone else process it.
Absolutely. Well said. Yeah. It's kind of like, it's just part of those layers, I think, of grief too. Yeah. As well. It's like taking it off. I mean, even though there's already been a divorce, I think it was still that I was still grieving, not necessarily for the person as so much as the ideal of what the marriage meant to me and how important, and, you know, just the symbolism of it. So taking it off literally was one of my boys telling me, Mom, I think it's time for you to take that thing off.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Deana, do you find that those people in our lives play a part in our processing, good or bad?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. Like it's really rough, you know, when you're forced to rip the Band-Aid off when you're not ready. Yeah, 100%. I mean, they can help us for the good too. I mean, you can have people in your life that push you, you know, to process things. I mean, one of the reasons that I finally left my ex, because I had separated from him 9 times over the 27 years. And he was so good at getting me back and so good at promising to be better, that it was my friends. It was some friends that looked at me and said, listen, we know he's crazy, but if you don't leave by this time, you're also crazy. And, you know, those words hit me like a ton of bricks, because I'd always considered myself to be a very healthy, balanced, stable person. And when suddenly it was twisted to, you know what's going on and you've known what's going on, and it's a repeating cycle and we're all tired of it. When it got to that point and I had to look at the reality of it, it really helped me to make that decision.
Yeah, I had this reminds me of the positives of having people in your life, you know, Lizzie's son saying, hey, Mom, you know, giving her that little push in the right direction. I'm guessing, you know, if Lizzie wasn't ready to take the wedding ring off, it wouldn't have come off. But sometimes hearing someone else say it can give us that positive push. I had an extended family member, second cousin, who had lost someone in their immediate nuclear family, and that they just were not processing grief properly. And at this point, I had lost both of my parents already. I'm significantly younger, and it's like a giant glaring, like neon sign, like this person is not processing this grief. They're waking up every day like this person just died, and it's been years. And finally I said something, and I found out it took about a year after that, and a few other people, again, a positive push in the right direction, saying, hey, so-and-so, you've got to see somebody. This is actually not how grief is supposed to go. You're not supposed to feel like this person just died 5 minutes ago. It's been 5 years. And so sometimes I do think that those people in our circles play a positive role. The first few times that, you separated, Deana, you weren't ready, right? But that last push that you got was the positive push, the good push, the good, when somebody gives us a shove in the right direction, and, they're shoving you. It might feel like they're still hitting you, but they're shoving you in the right direction for your own good.
Well, yeah. And I think sometimes a nice cold blast of truth is just what we need to make us look at the situation differently, because I think when you're in something, and I know when you are in something, the confusion is so thick, the fog is so thick that you really can't see everything clearly, and especially when it's been a few years since you've had, because my ex would cycle, the sexual addiction would cycle every 2 to 3 years is when I would catch him in something. It didn't mean he wasn't always doing it. I just feel like he got better at hiding it. And sometimes I think he would hold off for a while, but all those abusive cycles. And, if it's been a couple of years and you've reconciled and things seem to be pretty stable and you're doing okay and you have happier moments, you tend to forget about, what you went through, and so again, having some from the outside that's like, I don't care if it is every 2 or 3 years. This is a repeating pattern. This guy has been faithful 1,000 times. This guy is wreaking havoc on your life every single day, which, financially, that was one of the biggest ones. And you are not well. You are not well because of this person. And I know you might think you're well, but you're not well. And it's just so helpful to have somebody give you that truth, which is what Lizzie and I want to offer, because women have such a hard time, especially. I know men deal with this too, but I think women, being the moms and worrying about the children and, that nurturing center of a woman, it is so difficult to be the one to break up a family, as dysfunctional as it may be, and then face the future of having to be the breadwinner because, most women don't make as much as their spouses or partners. So there's just so much to consider. But yeah, having someone to kind of give you a wake-up call is vital. And that's what Lizzie and I want to offer.
Yeah. Well said. Like I echoed everything she just said.
What she said. No, it's true. Sometimes, the words, we can summarize it better when we're on the outside or we're not the person we're summarizing. We have a better view. I do think it's important to point out that you mentioned, Deana, the 2 to 3 year pattern. This also happens in spending addiction. I recently, for my financial coach friends who are listening, I recently did a training on this for spending addiction. And one of the traits is that it's not a 2 to 3 month pattern. It's like seasonal, or when a certain time of year comes around, or it can even be every 2 to 3 years, depending on what the person, the addiction, what the spending addiction really centers on. But it is still a pattern. And it's still something that, again, maybe we are not able to see it when we're in the weeds, but the person who's standing on the outside of the forest is like this. Hello, pay attention, wake up. Don't you see that it's happening again? And we need those people, definitely. So all of the Matadoras contact information is going to be in our show notes, as always. So you guys can reach out if this story is sounding familiar. If it's yourself or someone else in your life, please don't hesitate to reach out to them. What we're going to talk about today, though, is a little bit different. We're going to start with Deana and talk about how this, particular part of Deana's life, this relationship, and finally leaving this marriage. What was the financial ramifications? What were the financial hardships? What did this type of situation, Deana, create? And how does finances play a part in the decision to finally leave, or all those decisions you made not to leave initially?
Yeah, great questions. So to start with, because, mine and Lizzie's ex had a sexual addiction, addictions tend to run in pairs or triplets, right? So he definitely had a financial addiction as well, as you stated. So this led to constant mismanagement of money, although he always wanted to have control of the money. And, he was very strong as a person and a personality. And so he would kind of railroad, the ability to run the finances. And I didn't feel strong enough to tell him no. And he was actually good with finances to a degree, because we always were struggling. Now, I never connected the dots for a lot of time of the during the marriage that it was his misspending that kept us broke. I never really connected those dots. So I just thought, no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I did, and there were times where I worked 3 jobs with 4 little kids at home, and it didn't matter how much I worked, we were always broke. But I never really connected the dots for a long time. And I would say that just him constantly spending on whatever he wanted. He would always get credit cards. He would always, book trips, little trips for himself, and maybe take my dad with him and say that it was a bonding time with my dad. Or, there was something going on with the NBA in this city over here. And he was always making little trips for himself. And then, he would also make little trips for us. And so it seemed like he was always trying to add in some fun and some, family togetherness, etc. But what that amounted to was just money going out the door. And if I got super upset or angry, or we had a big fight, he would bring me some jewelry. I would have some jewelry up here, and then I'd find out he had charged the jewelry, that now I had a bill coming in, for $1,000. And it was just so oppressive. Like, I can't even describe to you how oppressive it was to have 4 little kids and never be able to make it, never be able to get ahead. And I would get very, very upset. And of course, all that anger started escalating later in the relationship when I realized you are spending money left and right. And at that point, he started hiding it. So now he has secret credit cards, and he's taking credit cards out in my name because his credit isn't so great anymore, because, we weren't making the bills. And there was a bankruptcy that happened because we weren't making the bills. And so my credit, again, was still better than his. So he's got credit cards, and I find out, and they're all charged up in my name, affecting my credit, my personal credit.
Right.
So it was just a constant cycle of absolute exhaustion, because it's difficult enough when, your spouse is roving around and looking for people to hook up with. But to add that additional financial stress was exhausting. And we ended up filing bankruptcy a second time as soon as the 7 years at that point in time passed, and we were allowed to file bankruptcy again. We filed bankruptcy again. And the humiliation of walking into that courtroom when you never would have gotten yourself in that situation, because I was always cutting coupons and finding deals and going to yard sales and, homemade haircuts for my kids, which were treacherous, by the way. All the things that you would do to just try to make ends meet, and to an extreme. And it still just wasn't enough. And being in that court and standing there and having to face the fact that, these creditors come in right to the courtroom, and they're looking at you, and they're up there on the microphone telling the courtroom what items that you did not pay for that they are going to take away from you, and watching your car being towed away.
Oh,
Things like that. It's just, it's like as low as you can possibly get. And that constant feeling of, I don't feel like this was my fault. I don't feel like I did this. I wouldn't have allowed it to happen. And yet we're together. So anything he does, it's my responsibility too.
Yeah.
So it was really, really devastating, and no different leaving the marriage. Leaving the marriage was, at that point, I realized how much he loved his money, and that's all that mattered to him. And I didn't ask him for any of his retirement, which by that point he had probably 25 years in the federal prison system, probably a decent retirement. I never even looked at it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't care about it. I just wanted out. So I didn't ask him for his retirement. Our kids were grown. There was no child support. I had gotten this amazing job for the first time in my life as a manager at a hospital, and I was going to be just fine financially. And so I just thought, you know what, take your money, because that's all you care about, and go. And it wasn't maybe a few weeks later that he came back to the house to get some things and then just took everything of value in the house.
Oh.
The TVs, all the everything we'd accumulated over the years that had any kind of monetary value, he took. And it was just like, whatever, that's just who you are, So yeah, it was, leaving penniless, leaving with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
My credit was shot.
Something interesting, that it's bad enough. You said it in this order, which I thought was interesting, because the financial coach in me is thinking differently. It's bad enough having someone who's, cheating on you and outside of the marriage and adultery and all that stuff. It's bad enough having that and then having the financial issue on top of it. I reversed it in my head. It's bad enough having the financial problems, because these are most of the people I work with. When I work with a couple, it's bad enough having the financial issues. And now I'm picturing some of these people I'm working with, one of them's cheating on each other. And I'm just like, oh my God, imagine adding this layer to this couple I just started working with, who's been married for 25 years and have grandchildren. And imagine now adding this layer of adultery, of stepping out on their spouse. It's almost unfathomable to me. And I've worked with couples who were separating. I've worked with them together. I've worked with them separately. I've both sides, male, the husband and the wife. And that has happened before while I've been working with them in a coaching relationship. But I haven't had it where someone was cheating on the other one.
Wow.
And I've been coaching we're coming on 10 years soon. And it must be just this absolute, another just bombshell hitting you out of, imagine learning about both things at once. Obviously that probably wouldn't happen in the same breath, but those two things colliding, it's almost unfathomable to me at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And it was really, honestly, almost completely unbearable just going through it for that long, and, again, for the first couple decades, I just took responsibility on myself that we just weren't good with money, the two of us. And it was probably the last 5 to 7 years that I realized, this is not me. This is not me. I don't make these decisions. I don't do things like this. And I'm trying to get him to stop hiding the things that he bought and hiding the credit cards and hiding, so yeah, you start to separate their behavior from your behavior, which is very healthy, when you're getting toward the end, right? Because you really need to understand what really is your responsibility. What really have you done wrong? What have you not done wrong? Just because the two of you are standing in court, filing bankruptcy again, and feeling completely humiliated, it doesn't necessarily mean that was your choice and that you helped out that choice, because
right. You were just as much an actor in this story as the other person standing next to you. You might have been a supporting actor and you didn't know it.
Right.
It's interesting that both of these behaviors are based on hiding. That's what I wrote down. Yeah. Both of these behaviors are based on hiding something from the person who is supposed to be your partner in life. Yeah. And it really just sums up the narcissist side of the behavior to me. So Lizzie, what was it like for you?
Well, I went through a lot that Deana went through. In fact, it's kind of like as she hashes it out, it really activates my emotions because we went through a lot of the same thing. And I thought, we make good money, right? We do really well. Why are we struggling from paycheck to paycheck? And it was really starting to get embarrassing. And then I realized later on, he was maxing out credit cards. He would ask for an increase, like $20,000 on something that was just in my name, and then max that out. And I didn't have that much in my, I kept my credit cards low on purpose. And it just was like, it got to the point you can't manage it. You
Right.
can't. So we had to file bankruptcy. And like Deana said, there's nothing more humbling, embarrassing than standing out there with guilt, shame in front of a judge with your lawyer and going, is this ever going to be an end in sight? And then after that, I think it was like 4 years after that, when things started escalating on the other side, because we were together for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize he wasn't paying my credit cards. Because like Deana said, he would just kind of take over the finances. So anything that was just in my name wasn't being paid at the end. And I had no idea. And then, of course, my credit card tanked, but I didn't know until I left and I tried to get an apartment. I didn't know the devastation of it.
Right. The extent of what had happened during that period of time. So I'm just wrapping my head around somebody at least having filed bankruptcy 3 times in his life.
Yeah.
Possibly more. I mean, we may not have, kept up after that or before that. But that is just mind-boggling. And some of this would have had to have happened after the bankruptcy laws changed. So I'm guessing at least one of them would have had to have happened after 2009, 2010. And it wasn't as forgiving. So the financial position that, his credit is in is not as forgiving as it would have been if all 3 of these bankruptcies occurred prior to 2009 and 2010, when those consumer laws passed and made it more difficult to have that stuff erased from your credit. It's just mind-boggling that the behavior continued for all of this time. And so, Lizzie, how did you begin to dig out of it?
Well, it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. I had to work, like I would teach during the day in the beginning, and then I would do like DoorDash, Grubhub at night.
I love those.
Because my kids were all adults, so I had to do what I had to do. And that was just to survive and start making minimum payments on things. And it took until probably just a few months ago where I wasn't being drugged down or connected to any of his credit or his choices, because we had one thing combined. And I tell you what, that was a day of celebration when that was cleared out, because I separated in November 2018. My divorce was filed April 2019. So I didn't get cleared from everything that had both of our names on it until I think it was like the end of October, November
2024, right? So we're talking 7 years. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. The and there's going to be some Dave Ramsey fanatics out there, you don't co-sign for things, but this person was your husband, right? It's not like this was a drug addicted brother-in-law, right? And Lizzie, come on, you should have paid attention better. Like, this was the person you were married to. And so people need to realize that it's not, I don't want to say it's not all cut and dry, but it's going back and looking at it, you could say like, that wasn't a great idea. But at the time, it's like, what? No financial coach would have told you no. They would have said, yes, it's good to have your finances combined. And but the layers that we've talked about of the narcissistic behavior, that's what turns these things into these types of stories.
Absolutely. And it's one I like. The one thing I think both Deana and I always recommend is just being very alert in your relationship and how the spending is going. And before you even get there, or before you get married, watch their spending habits. Because that is just as important as how they interact with other people, or how they treat you, or how they treat your kids if it's a second marriage and you're blending. Those are all signs that, you want somebody financially healthy, maybe not wealthy, but you want someone who takes care of their business and does their best to make good choices.
Yeah, absolutely. You do not need to be a multimillionaire to have a sustainable, manageable, comfortable life. You don't, it's paying attention to things. And Deana, you pointed out the kind of extreme couponing and the trying to save money during the process, and that wasn't even working. And that usually works, right? Like if we were in a situation where it was just a financial issue, usually the sacrificing and the cutting back and things like that, that's something people have to go through if they're digging out of a financial hole. But in your situation, you were digging out of a hole and the bottom was getting dug out from underneath you.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. Yes, exactly.
You were trying to fill in the hole and someone else was digging out while you're trying to fill in.
Yes. And I'll add too that, I was about 2 years out of the marriage, and on the divorce papers, we still had bills, getting out of the marriage. And on the divorce papers, we had split all of the bills, and I gave him half and I took half. And in 2 years' time, I had remarried and I had paid off all of those bills. And my credit was finally, for the first time, climbing. And I was so proud of myself, and everything was just going so well. And then he filed bankruptcy with Lizzie. And I'll put the emphasis on him, by the way. He filed bankruptcy, and Lizzie was an innocent victim. And literally, it didn't matter what those divorce papers said. It didn't matter that we had divided them and that the judge had stamped everything. It doesn't matter. And so I want people to know, even if you split things in a divorce, if your name is on it, those creditors have every right to come after you. And so that's exactly what happened. I paid off all my half, and then he filed bankruptcy once more and stopped paying on just like he did Lizzie, stopped paying on all the bills that he had well before the bankruptcy went through. And he drug me right back to square one. So 2 years out of the marriage, I've got all these creditors calling me. My credit dropped like 100 points. And they're like, you owe us $14,000 for these debts.
My gosh.
Yeah. So just a warning to anybody out there, make sure before you get out of a relationship, of a marriage, that your name is not on anything. Get it off of everything. Yeah. Close it, get rid of it. Don't go in there, because it'll be yours forever.
Right. Make it a contingency of the paperwork that's, being filed and the things that have to be done prior to the judge stamping everything. It's, but I mean, I guess in my brain, I would think this person must have learned by now. Right? This person's been out of my life, even though I was married to them for 27 years. This person's been out of my life for 2 years. They must have figured it out by now. Perhaps I'm the eternal optimist in that situation, but someone like this most likely doesn't learn these lessons the first time, the second time, maybe ever.
Well, there's no learning. It's really all about, what can I get out of this person? Mm-hmm. What can I get out of this situation? They're like a criminal mastermind opportunist in the relationship, and they just want to get things. Even when he went to relationship number 3, the first thing he started doing was, getting her to go in on a boat with him, and getting her to, to start looking to buy a home, and, getting on her credit and all the things. And so it's just really not a learning situation, because if these people had an ability to learn, then they could actually grow and become better people. But it's just this constant, siphoning off of anybody around them to make themselves happier and more wealthy, while you get poorer and poorer.
Yeah, right. There is no empathy, right? Would that be the correct words? Empathy, sympathy, any of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's none of that. It's not built into them, I guess. Geez, it's incredible that you guys found each other. And like I said, all of the contact information for Deana and Lizzie is in our show notes today. And so I want to thank you guys so much for being with me today and sharing your stories. You guys are, on the other side and continuing to move in that direction. And I couldn't be happier for you. Thanks again for joining me.
Thank you, Suzanne. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much.